Savage on the set. Oh no, it's the Popo. Ryan Tillman. Let him have it. Savage on the set. AJ. What up, boy? Ryan Tillman.
Yo, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the It's Needed podcast, where we discuss real issues involving law enforcement in the community. It's your boy Ryan Tillman, founder of Breaking Barriers United, and I am joined by the light-skinned wonder himself, Mr. Oh No, it's the Popo. What's up, bro?
What's the word, brother? What's the word?
Just nothing much except your little extra small shirt you got on today.
It's just medium, man. You know, make me look bigger. You know, I'm talking about my shirt.
Yeah, okay. We're also joined by the
AJ.
What's that?
Let them know.
What brand is that?
That's Under Armour.
Okay.
Hey, Dr. Jones. Hey, tell him we can't have that. Tell him we can't have Under Armour.
Well, he's looking pretty small, so he can wear what he wants, you know.
I got some Nikes too, so it's my Under Armour day.
Oh man. So we are joined by the Savage as well, only for a short time because the Savage is about to do some big shot things. So Big Shot Billy's about to leave here in a little bit, as always. But what's up, Billy? While you're here,
what's going on? I shouldn't even came. You just give me a hard time for 20 minutes and then I head out. That's about it.
Hey, our viewers love us giving you a hard time. That's why we have success. So
the people wanted to see
and
Billy.
Yeah, exactly. And we got a very, very special guest today. Pretty honored. I actually met Dr. Jones at a recent event last week, and we got to talking a little bit. I got to hear what he was doing, and I just thought there was some really good synergy there. So I asked him if he would be on our podcast, and he obliged us. And so we had Dr. Jones on. What's going on, Dr. Jones?
Man, I'm fantastic. How are you guys doing?
We are doing well, man. We are doing well. You know, it's Memorial Day, so you know we're here to be able to talk about it, unlike some other people, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, you're 100% right, and I'm really blessed to be here, and I'm thank you for inviting me.
Oh, anytime, man, anytime. It's a true honor. And so what we're going to do today, before we jump into the topics, because there's a couple things I wanted to talk about, but specifically what I wanted to do, I wanted to get an intro into yourself. Now, one of the things that I thought was so cool when I met you was just like you have a very interesting story. And, you know, then after meeting you, I went and did my own research and kind of looked in to see some of the other work and the work that you've been doing over the course of the last few years. And I thought it was very similar to kind of the work that AJ and I are trying to doing, in the fact that we're trying to bridge the gap with humanity, you know, doing work for the youth, less specifically the youth. I mean, the youth is so important, and I think they often get overlooked. So that's really why I wanted to bring you on today to talk about some of those issues. But before we get there, tell our audience who you are, what you do, and how you got to the position you're in now.
Okay, man. So I'll do a kind of a walkthrough starting early in life. Lived in 5 different states before 5th grade. I'm originally from Michigan. Raised by my mom through 6th grade, 7th through 12th by my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. Went to undergrad at Michigan State, grad school at DePaul in Chicago. Ultimately finished my doctorate in 2018. At Case Western in Cleveland, Ohio. And I know somebody's got some Ohio roots here. I saw one of the podcasts. So
that's right.
I'll say shout out to Ohio, man. I don't know what I think about Ohio, AJ. I'll tell you what, but I have love for Ohio. My father was born in Ohio, Central State grad.
Nice.
And you know, Ohio's always treated me well, man. But it is the Midwest. You know, it's pretty flat. Right. I grew up in Michigan. But career-wise, you know, Ryan, you know, I spent 20 years at Nike and various disciplines. I was head of U.S. diversity at one point in time, head of global sales for the Olympics. I was our vice president general manager for the East Coast business in New York, national sales director for Brand Jordan, all over the course of about 20 years. So ultimately, man, in 2015, I decided that the company asked me to move back to Portland and take on that role, heading up the Olympic sales group. And that was my last run. So I did that for 2 years, decided I didn't want my legacy to be that Nike guy. It was a great run, but it was time to move on. Went back, got the doctorate, taught college for 3 years. And just to kind of bring it up to speed, I'm have my own consulting business now. And I do organizational advisement. And Ryan, I focus on culture, I focus on organizational development, alignment, and attitude and values. And I do that work for small to medium-sized businesses. And then lastly, one thing that I was really proud of, but it was a small moment in time for me, I founded the E5 Foundation in Chicago. And the E5 Foundation was for youth in Chicago, marginalized youth. And my goal was to give them the tools and help them develop the tools to become rightly guided adults. So I focused on things like exercise, eating right, exploring, and then obviously being educated. So here I am today. I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona. I would say right now, this is home for me, and it probably will be for the foreseeable future. But I also love a city, man. Like, I like a real city, buildings, people, culture. And this doesn't necessarily offer that, but I can also chill and relax my mind here.
Yeah, there's
That's
something to be
cool.
said about that.
Yes,
Doc,
absolutely.
And I won't hold it to you being from Michigan, being from Columbus. I won't hold it to you. I'm a Buckeye through and through, but
Oh,
Dr.
all right.
Jones, I'm
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that, man. I'm sorry to hear that. No,
Well, I'm mad
I have love for the
Go
Big
ahead.
Ten.
appreciate you.
I'm mad that I let Billy escape out of here before I got to pick on him some more, because when we were creating this podcast, there's something we'll do at the very end, but I needed him to pull up a Jordan logo. And so he was like, hey, so which Jordan logo is it? He was like, is it the one with the guy that's doing this, or is it the one with like it says like the words Air Jordan or something like that, or Team Jordan, something like that.
No, he ain't say
And
that.
I just start cracking up. I start
He
busting
ain't
up. He was
say
like,
that.
what? You see? He was like, what?
Oh,
He was like, I would be. He was like, I would be the white guy that says that.
come on, Billy.
Oh man.
That's
So I'm
funny.
mad that
That's funny.
I let him get out of here before I mess with him. But
I
Doc,
think
you
beat
said
him up
something
enough.
cool. Yeah, I did. But you said something that's interesting. I really want to touch on it because before we get to our topic, because I think it's pretty cool, and I don't want to brush over this. Is that
Mhm.
you had a really, really good job with Nike. I mean, Nike obviously is one of the biggest companies in the world, and not just a job. You were a VP at Nike, so it's not like you were just doing a regular employee working at a store or a storefront. You were a VP, and so you left that because you wanted to go. You said you didn't want that to be your legacy, and I don't want people to brush over that, man, because that's huge. You essentially left something great to go be greater. And I think sometimes we get in a stagnant place in life where we start allowing the environment to create who we are, as opposed to going out there and redirecting and changing the environment that we live in. And I really want to know, like, what caused you to do that, because that's a big move. A lot of our followers know recently, like 2 months ago, I left my job as a full-time police officer in order to go embark on the work that I'm doing full time, which is speaking in schools, doing all these other things. So that was one of the hardest decisions in my life, because think about it, I'm married, got 3 kids. At the time I had a steady check every other Thursday. That check hits. So I had a feeling of comfort and all this other thing. And so I left and walked into the unknown. And for similar reasons to you, Doc, for me, I wanted my legacy to be something different. So what was it for you that caused you and motivated you, gave you that fuel to make that leap?
Yeah, Ryan and AJ, for me, man, it was ensuring, and this was instilled to me by my mom and grandmother, always operating with a sense of purpose and not necessarily putting at the center of your activities yourself all the time. So the money was outstanding, man. But at that point, I was fortunate enough that it didn't need to be about money for me. I'd invested well, avoided alimony, avoided child support. And I'm just being real with you now. So I was in a situation where I had some financial independence, and it wasn't about working anymore. And I could truly put at the center, man, things that were important to me. And what was important to me is adding value outside of just building personal wealth. And that's what it became those last 2 years. I loved my job and I loved the people I worked with, but it also felt like the culture had changed pretty significantly at Nike, and it was time for me to make a move. And, that happens, man. It's a job at the end of the day, and it's a business. So for me, one of the things that was most important to me was being able to control every minute of my day. And for some people, that's not necessarily important, but for me, it's extremely important. I got Virgo blood. I'm an only child. I'm a latchkey kid.
Mhm.
I need to operate in an environment that's conducive to my well-being. And that was very important for me, man. So, the legacy thing, had achieved some financial independence. So I was good there, and just really wanting to add value, man. I always dreamed of being, having my doctorate and teaching college and doing consulting on my own. And I was able to do that.
What age were you when you went back to go get your doctor, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't mind. So I was mid 40s, I think it was. I'm trying to put my years together now. Yeah, I was like mid to late 40s. And I felt like if I knew I was going to do it, but the timing, I didn't have any excuses anymore. And we started with about 25 in that first class, and we actually graduated with about 8. So it was
Wow.
it was very challenging, man. It was definitely an intellectual journey, physical journey.
Mhm.
I was flying back and forth from Portland to Cleveland every month, but I wouldn't change a thing, man. I loved it.
So I just need to know what the secret is, because you said you went back to get your doctorate at the mid to late 40s, but you on the podcast right now looking like you're in your late 30s to early 40s. So I need to know what the secret is.
Brother, man, I didn't appreciate that as in the past as much as I do now. So you can say that as many times as you want on this show.
Yeah,
I'll be
absolutely.
56 in September.
You'll be
Killing it.
say that again.
Killing it.
Yeah, I'll be 56 in September. I was born in 66, man. You should see my
Ooh,
mom.
man.
My mom is still a beautiful woman. My dad kept himself together for the most part. We can talk about that later. But I try and take care of myself as well, man. But yeah, I'll be turning the good old 5'6" this year, man.
Good.
Man,
Good.
looking good though. Hey, I'm not gonna lie though, Doc. You was one of the freshest looking cats there. I was like, okay, I see.
Well, now it's making sense why he asked me. He's like, "What brand shirt is that?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's Under Armour." He's like,
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, I try to stay fresh, man. You never know who's gonna be in the room or what you need to say or do. So and I haven't had a chance to really, put on a jacket in quite a long time, to be honest, Ryan. So I took advantage of the moment, man. Just tried to wear something nice and clean.
So it
Very
was
nice.
funny, man. We were at this event in Dallas, and it was like the little after party. So we went upstairs. I met Doc, and he was sitting with a couple of his buddies. But I'm telling you, like, two of the most swaggiest OG type, like just cigars, got the top hat. I'm like, man, I'm feeling the vibes right now. I'm like, this is what I want to be this is where I want to be at. So
well, I tell you what, man. I want to say this though. You have a presence about you, and congratulations on your honor. To be honored by someone like Dak, man, who I have a lot of respect for. He's had a tough journey, man. He's got a lot of pressure on him as a young man, and I think he handles it very well. But back to you, to be honored when that award could have gone to anyone. So you're doing something right, man, and you have a presence about you that is very positive, and as does your wife. And you guys make a great unit, man. So that didn't go unnoticed as well, man. So I'm glad we connected, and I'm glad we're here today.
And I don't want to just brush over that, Ryan, because you didn't even touch on that. Like, I don't think that people really know like what Dr. Jones is talking about. So can we elaborate a little bit? Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I would. So yes, like Dr. Jones was saying, I had the fortune. I've been doing some work, and actually, as a matter of fact, Shannon, who is such a dear friend of mine, her son is actually here in studio today as a guest. So really cool. I met Shannon.
Okay.
Yes. So Shannon's a really good friend of mine. I met her a few years ago, and that was right when Dak wanted to start doing some work specifically related to law enforcement and community relations. And Dak, when I say Dak Prescott, the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. And so, I we got introduced to each other, and I thought it was a really cool opportunity because that's been my platform for the last 7-8 years, has been trying to bridge that gap. So there were some synergies there, and we got connected. In the last year and a half, we've been doing all sorts of stuff. I've been speaking in schools on behalf of Dak's organization. We've been trying to head up some different other things regarding mental health, and we've been doing town halls. I've been going to schools, and so it was a true. When I talked to Shannon a few weeks ago, and Shannon said, "Hey," and this is what a lot of people don't realize, and this you guys probably hear for the first time. Shannon told me a couple weeks ago, "Hey, we're going to give you an award at the event." So, obviously, I thought it was a true honor and a true privilege. But what I didn't realize until the night actually came is I didn't realize that it was the only award of the night. I was thinking that I was going to be receiving an award alongside other people that have been doing other work in the community and things like that, which would have still been a true privilege. But when we were at the event, Dak was hosting a gala. When I found out, they were like, "Hey, you got to give a speech," and I'm thinking like, okay, like, I first, like, no joke, I'm thinking like, man, okay, give like a 30-second thank you, I appreciate it, because I'm thinking I'm going to be getting an award alongside other people. No, it wasn't that. And so when we actually got there, I didn't realize that I was the only award that was given that night, and it was the first annual Game Changer Award that they just created for this his inaugural gala that they host. So it was a true honor, true privilege. And man, like I said at the event, I wanted to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, but also just all my friends and family and Shannon's mom. And so it was really cool. It was an honor, and for me, if anything, what I took from it, it just motivated me that much more to continue to go out there and do the work that we're doing. Like, it is so important. That kind of leads me into today's topic. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put some topics on screen. These are just 2 headlines that I'm going to put on screen. And I hate to change topics, but I'm going to do it. But if you guys have been watching the news, you guys are seeing headlines about a whole bunch of stuff. Gun control, pros and cons. Where do both parties stand? Another one, review of how police responded to the recent attack in Uvalde, Texas. Like, there have been so many headlines that have been going on, and we are getting distracted sometimes by politics. And I made a post the other day on my IG. I said, at what point are we going to start making everything so political and actually just get back to focusing on people? Just like loving people and caring about people. I think so many times we get focused on being on the left or the right side of things, and we just forget about the people that it's actually affecting. And so that's why I'm really glad that we have you on today, Dr. Jones and AJ, because you gentlemen really care about people. So that kind of leads me into the next topic or next question for you guys is like, what can we do right where we're at to impact change? Like, sometimes I think we wait on politicians. Sometimes we wait on certain bills. Sometimes we feed into this whole narrative on social media and stuff, as opposed to just going out there and doing change. And that's what I respect most about Dak. Because the thing about Dak Prescott is, when this whole police brutality thing happened, when George Floyd was killed, there was a lot of people on social media talking about, oh, we need to do this. Oh, we need to do that. Oh, Dak is one dude that said, hey, look, I'm pledging $1 million to combat whatever social injustices exist. And I'm going to go out there and try to be that change. And not only did he say it, but he actually did it. And not only did he do it, he did it from a position of grace and mercy. He came at it from the middle. He wasn't on the far left. He wasn't on the far right. He said, I'm going to go and get all these people together and figure out what solutions we can provide in order to stimulate change. And so my question for you guys is, what can we do right where we're at to stimulate the change? And a lot of people are talking about gun control and this and that. What do you guys think is the solution right now?
I'll let Dr. Jones.
You want me to kick it off, AJ?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, first of all, honestly, I think it starts with having conversations like we are, and bringing awareness to it at a really intellectual level. I think that's number one. Number two, I think, when you think about the three of us and you think about how fast time moves and just our sort of profiles demographically, if we aren't making change, then who is? So we have to live that. And, AJ, I'm not 100% sure of your background. I was definitely impressed by what I saw on the podcast, but I'm sure there's more to it. But, Ryan, as you talked about shifting from this sense of security to one of accountability is very important. And I think it starts there. And that was part of my shift as well. And part of the consulting work that I do is squarely focused on getting people to operate with a singular identity. Not these competing self-identities where they step into one room and they wear one hat. In the next room, they're this barrel-chested person who's, got all this faux energy. It's like, create an identity that really, really is adding value, and that you're comfortable with and doesn't operate in self-preservation.
Mm.
So that's a journey, and we have to
Yeah.
realize what that means. We have to realize that oftentimes we operate in crisis because there's so much going on, but unwittingly we do it. We don't realize we're actually in psychological crisis where we
Wow, that's
aren't
deep.
flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to start to realize what those keys to crisis are. And sometimes that means being in a certain environment, not being around certain people, and shifting your accountabilities to adding value. So in a nutshell, for me, it's really operating with a singular identity that's led by purpose.
That's
good.
deep.
That's good.
What about you, AJ?
Yeah, so for me, not to be cliche with the whole Nike Under Armour thing going on right now, but like when it comes down to the nitty gritty, like you just have to do it.
Yep.
And I don't know how else to say it, but
Mhm.
when I first got in policing and I saw the lack of positive policing on social media, I didn't wait to see somebody else start doing it. Like I just did it. And the same thing with you, Ryan. Like when you notice the lack of like positivity surrounding policing, and when you notice like the miscommunication, like you didn't wait to start BBU, you did it. When we met, Ryan, we talked about the podcast at the event that we both spoke at, and it wasn't what, a month or 2 months after that we launched it.
We did.
Neither one of us knew anything about podcasts, but what we did know is that we saw that there was a need, and we knew that need needed to be met. And we did it. And just hearing your story, Dr. Jones, like you were in a position where you were comfortable at this huge organization, probably making amazing money. You were in your groove, but you saw a need and you didn't wait. You saw that need and you go, I'm just going to do it. And I think that sometimes we get so wrapped up in everything else. And those things might be, well, what are people going to say? What if I fail? What if it doesn't transpire the way that I thought it would, that we get these negative thoughts and we go, well, I'm comfortable where I'm at. I'm comfortable at Nike. I'm comfortable not putting stuff on social media. I'm comfortable not speaking at schools. And we don't do it. But we, meaning us three, are living proof that if you take that step of faith and you keep walking and you put one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, that it's possible that you will achieve these goals. And we're here to tell you that.
Yeah. I don't know
So
if
we
you
had a
want
question
me-
from Kevin. Yeah, we had a question come in from Kevin Wilson, and he asked, Dr. Jones, can you expand on singular identity, please?
Absolutely. When we as humans oftentimes as we enter into situations of high risk and difficulty, or perceived high risk and difficulty, we enter into a mode of self-preservation. And our first instinct is survival, whether it's real or perceived.
Hmm.
And it's hard for us to be our best selves, our optimal selves, when we're in that mode. Now, sometimes we realize it, sometimes we don't. So we start to have these competing identities. One that's about self-preservation, one that's about, I don't want to show up this way. The other is about, I also have to protect some people around me. So understanding those triggers that shift us into competing identities is very important. And we can all sometimes feel ourselves escalating. And you guys are obviously trained to de-escalate situations, etc. The layperson is not,
Mhm.
right? And we need to understand those cues and triggers. And I think it's very important. And it's, human behavior was my field of study from a management perspective as it related to my doctoral program. And that's what I mean by these competing identities, where, we start to seek, again, unwittingly, subconsciously, protection and acceptance and survival when difficulty arises. And sometimes we just don't realize it. And when we do that, our whole mode of existence shifts and we aren't flourishing anymore. We're just trying to survive, perceived as just trying to survive in our heads.
So let me ask you this, Doc. Would you say that our emotions tie into that? Because
Heavily.
I think a lot of times we are driven by our emotions, And I don't know if this
Yes.
is kind of in the similar lane, but I think, and I've been saying this for such a long time, which is why anytime people see things on social media, I always tell them, like, take a step back
Mhm.
and try to remove the emotional lens from it, because the emotional lens, I feel, sometimes takes you to another place, and it
Yes.
gets you to respond in ways that you shouldn't be responding. Not saying that the emotions aren't legitimate, but it will have you react in a way that is not, true to your character. And so, we go to the situation back in Uvalde, Texas. It
Mhm.
really drew an emotional response out of a lot of people. And sometimes, because of that emotional response, it suppresses a lot of the realities and facts behind the situation. For example, and I'm not trying to, make this all about Uvalde. That's not what this is about, but I'm using it as an example. Is when this first came out, you start seeing all these different videos that were circulating of law enforcement not going in there, and they were standing out for 40 minutes, 40 minutes and all this other stuff. And you see the videos, and then in the videos that are taken from bystanders and stuff like that, you see our parents arguing like, "Hey, I need to go in there," and you see the
Yeah.
police holding them back. So the
Mhm.
emotional side of that is, as a parent, it fires you up. You're mad. You're angry. Like, why would these officers, not allow these parents to get in there? Why would these officers not in there and go and try to stop this guy? But then what I did is I put a video out, and there were some people that were super upset with my video, and my video was so basic, and it says something like this. I said, "Look, every situation, you got to wait for some of the facts to come out behind this,
Right.
because there are things that aren't always that is not always what meets the eye." And I gave some examples where I talked about some videos that look really, really bad, but when the facts came out, you understood exactly why they did what they did. And so I said something similar. I said, let's just wait for the information to come out. I'm sure once they always do a critical incident debrief, and once that critical incident debrief is exposed, then we'll know whether law enforcement made mistakes, what improvements need to be made, and if anybody needs to be held accountable. But because we're so driven by the emotional side of things, we were like, we wanted to hang these officers to dry right away. And we negated the fact of all the victims that are still the families of the victims that haven't even had the time to cope, yet alone the officers that walked in there and saw a lot of the trauma of these dead babies. We haven't even allowed them to cope with that. So what I'm getting at is, I think if we allow us to be led by our emotions, then it will cause you to be distracted. And what we're starting to see now is that, the officers did go in. The reasons why the officers didn't they couldn't penetrate the door initially is because they didn't have the tools, and the guy was shooting at the door. So you're starting to see all these teachers that are coming out saying, "Hey, look, they were there." But yet, because we were driven by our emotions, it allowed people to make comments that they really can't take back. And that's kind of what I'm getting from the self-identity, is like, you gotta be wary. So correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe thinking I could completely be off base, but I want to know if I'm on the right track.
You're 100% on the right track. So, as a matter of fact, the foundation of my research was a focus on behaviors, processes, and emotions. Those are the factors that contribute to internal crisis. So you're spot on. And rarely do we solve a problem through emotion,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So if you're talking about being solution oriented, typically emotion isn't our first go-to, right? We have to be rational and inject logic, and it's not easy. And the other phenomenon that you talked about is when we're operating in crisis mode, which starts to happen immediately when you feel your child is in danger.
Mhm.
Sometimes we subconsciously seek phenomena and data that supports that crisis, and we don't realize
Wow.
that's what we're doing. So anything we see now compounds this mounting crisis that's happening. We're not objective anymore. And that's another thing about the dual identities. We start to lose any sense of objectivity that we may have entered into the situation with. So
So
100%.
you start to look for stuff that fits your narrative, essentially, to kind of
100%.
back up what
Mhm.
you're. And honestly, man, that's what I feel is driving society bonkers right now. Like, you
Yeah.
don't really find a lot of people that can take a neutral stance and try to remove some emotions out of it and speak logically. That's why I always say, when it comes to politics, I like to consider myself more of an independent than anything, because
Mhm.
just by doing that one little thing, it allows me to not have to identify with Democrat or Republican. It allows me to see things from a truly neutral standpoint and not have to feel like I'm fixated on one or the other. And I think, not to say that that's the right way or the wrong way, but for me, that's what works, you know, and that's why I always find coming to places from a neutral standpoint is because you can honestly see what's true and what's real and try to remove some of the emotions out of it. Now, we're all human beings. You're all going to sense emotion, but figuring out how to separate yourself, kind of like what you're talking about, Doctor, I think is really going to solve a lot of our problems. And I'm going to take that. Rarely do we solve a problem with emotion.
Mhm.
That is big. And I think a lot of people brush over that. What do you think about that, AJ?
Yeah, I mean, I think emotion definitely has its place, but you know, as Dr. Jones said, you can't lead with, and you know, we've said this on the podcast before, like there's so many times where we see videos or we experience things throughout life, and it's like, don't let your emotions overpower your intelligence. And that's how we find ourselves in these situations, or we find ourselves sharing these posts, or excuse me, creating these posts. But you know, when we talk about emotion, I think it does have its place. And you know, I'll give you an example. If you experience, you know, something with law enforcement, we'll keep it law enforcement driven. For me, example, right? I get in law enforcement, and you know, I realize that there's a lack of positive policing on social media. I didn't immediately lead with my emotion. I took a step back and I went, how can I solve
Yeah.
this problem? And I came up with a game plan. And then when I started that journey, I was driven by emotion, because now I'm focused on
Got
how I can accomplish that goal. And sometimes, at least for me, emotion will push me through that finish line, because once again, as Dr. Jones said when we initially started this episode, it's a journey. It's a journey. It ain't just this is the
Yeah.
solution. Boom, I'm there. This might take you a month. This might take you a year. This might take you multiple years. So if you learn how to control that emotion and use it to your advantage, then there's definitely a place for it.
Couldn't agree more. And
Yeah.
again,
Go ahead.
you guys can feel free to call me DJ. I do appreciate the respect. But you guys can call me DJ.
Perfect.
So I mean, and you're right, AJ. I think emotion does have a place, and we can't
Yeah.
negate emotion. I think emotion is a good thing. So I don't want to label emotion as this big negative thing, but I think a lot of times we are led astray by our emotions. So you got to be able to sit back. And sadly, we live in this microwave society where we want things now. Like a situation happens, I want to know the answers right now. Like I want to know why the police officers didn't do this right now. And it's unfortunate because when we have that, again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, we're negating all the real victims that were traumatized by this situation. And what it also starts to do is it starts to take away from the person that actually caused all this damage in the first place. So by being distracted by the gun agenda, by being distracted by what the police did and what they didn't do, we have now turned our attention away from the person that caused all this in the first place. And so I think we need to find it. We got to figure out, like, how do we get beyond just, you know, this being driven by the emotional side of things and get back to, and like kind of what DJ was saying, like, you know, having that self-identity to where you can be who you are. And that's what I think I pride myself on most, is pretty much not being able to have to conform to it. And now I'm not going to get biblical and scriptural, but there's a Bible verse that I always stand up to, which is, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I always say that is because for me, there's so many people that are conforming. They're like the wave. They're like waves. They go back and forth. They're back and forth. And it's very rare that you find that person that's able to stand firm and not conform to the political pressures or what everybody's saying. Now, it's not an easy thing to do, but I think we need to see more of that. And I honestly think that's where, you know, you'll start to see some of the changing start to happen.
No, I agree 100%. And you know, we're human beings, right? So emotion is a part of our makeup. And passion is connected to emotion. And we all want to operate with passion. But there's healthy emotion.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to try to really concentrate on channeling in whatever we do.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And Ryan, it's good that you brought that up, because there's a comment here from Kevin Wilson. It says, follow-up question. Can emotions be neutral? I find society now does not allow us to be neutral. First, it pivots us to either take sides politically. um, I'll agree and I'll disagree with that statement. I agree that we are definitely in a world and living in times where it almost feels like you have to pick a side. Either you're with me or you're against me type of thing. But that just shows how important it is to not do that.
Yes.
That just shows how important that position is that we all have, where we're like, wait, everybody slow down, take a second, breathe. Let's think logically here. Let's put our emotions aside. Let's have this discussion, whether it's tough, whether it's easy, and let's find common ground before we dive into this. So you're right. We do live in times where it is hard, but because it's hard, that should tell you how important it is.
Yeah, and one of the challenges that I, inherently with the question, and I understand where Kevin's coming from.
Yeah.
We have to get to a point where we aren't concerned about being allowed to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when we say I find society now does not allow us to be, it's really not about being allowed to be. It's about you finding your empowerment.
That's good.
Do it.
To operate in a zone that you want to operate in. We can't sit around and wait on being allowed to be flourishing.
That's good. That's really good.
I love that. I love that. You know why I love that? And I think it was last episode that we talked about it, AJ. Remember, I can't remember the person that we had on, but we were talking about the system and all those other things. And like I said, I think that there's systematic problems, systematic racism, but not how people would typically view it. Like people talk about systematic racism and stuff, but I view systematic racism differently. And my point is that, because me and my wife had this discussion the other day as well. And when I talk about the system, I'm like, we sometimes we take on this victim mentality that, they won't allow me to do something because of the color of my skin, or they won't allow me to do something because I'm a female, this and that. And so I think it's more systematic racism when you actually have people that continue to perpetuate that mindset, causing and forcing this victim mentality because they want to keep you suppressed thinking like that, as opposed to thinking the latter, which is, no, man, like I honestly can go out there and do it. So don't get me wrong. I think there's definitely some systematic issues, but like DJ said, like, think about it. You were the VP and executive for arguably one of the world's biggest companies that's ever existed. And if you had that mentality, like, no, I can't do it, then you probably would have never did it because you never opened your mindset to say, like, no, I can go do it. And so when we go back to this question of saying if the society does not allow it, like you guys said, is I understand where you're going from. I understand the question, but I think that's what has allowed me to get into some of the rooms that I've been in, is I never really took no for an answer. Don't get me wrong. It's been hard to get yes sometimes. Don't get me wrong. There might have been some prejudiceness that allowed me not to get the yes answer. But if I stopped at that, then I would have never been able to get in the rooms and meet people like DJ or meet people like Dak or things like that, because I stopped because the society didn't allow that. So when we talk about systems and the systematic oppression, I think it's more of a systematic thing, a problem when you have people that continue to perpetuate, we're victims. You can't do this because you're black. You can't do this because you're a female, this and that. We got to get beyond that. So DJ, can you speak a little bit more to that? Because I talk to a lot of youth. I see you do a lot of youth as well. And that's one of my biggest messages, especially when I'm talking to youth of color, is like, look, don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't. You have to have the mindset that you can. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but when you get to that point, you'll start seeing a lot more doors open for you than they will close.
Yeah. So we know racism is real, and we know racism is a daily occurrence and something we encounter in almost every move we make. It's structural. And it lies within a lot of the structures that we have to interface with on a daily basis, and education, etc., politics. But what do you do with it? And, my philosophy, and I'm not saying it's an easy journey, is using it to build strength and build skill sets that allow you to persevere and flourish in any environment. And again, we're not going to succeed, quote unquote, in every encounter. But
Mhm.
I also know that I don't wait on racism to be eradicated in order for me to make moves.
That's good.
There
Right.
it is.
And when I'm dealing with, youth, and they're primarily brown and black, that's my message. You decide early how you want to deal with it, and center yourself around people who have a similar mentality. It's also very important. So, that's the philosophy. And again, I'm not saying this is easy by any stretch of the imagination,
Yeah.
No.
because I think kids are dealing with a lot more in a lot of ways than what I had to deal with as a kid.
You're
Absolutely.
Right. So I'm not at all pretending to have had a similar journey to them, but I also have my issues growing up in certain environments at the same time that they don't have in common. So yeah, I mean, I think it's, how do we want to deal with it? Are we prepared to deal with it? Are we building the muscle, intellectual muscle, emotional muscle, physical muscle that allows us to manage these situations?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
And
good.
you're right about that. When I was doing that town hall, these kids, man, they're going through stuff that I mean, I'll be 35 next week, and so I'm not that far removed from them, but there's a lot of things that they're going through that it's hard to don't be mad because I'm trying to stay young, you know what I'm saying? Don't be mad just 'cause I'm trying to be young like DJ. But man, like they're going through things that we never really had. I mean, think about the COVID pandemic that they went through.
Yep.
They had to go through learning that was virtual. I mean, it's hard enough for me to sit on virtual call, and I'm grown.
Listen.
So, how much difficult is for them to expect them to sit down in front of a computer and learn day in, day out, and then expect them to achieve doing that on top of not getting the social interaction that we need as human beings in order to learn how to thrive socially. And so there's a kid that stood up, and man, I applauded this kid. I wanted to give this kid a hug. He 13 or 14 years old, stood up in front of about 200 of his peers and basically said, "Hey, look, like, I have mental issues. I've been dealing with some things. They've prescribed me medication that is not working for me. They have prescribed me, or the doctors keep telling me this and that, and I felt bad." He's like, "What do I do? What do I do?" And so you're right, to your point, DJ, is like, man, these kids are going through some things that we've never had to go through, and there is, like you said, we're not saying it's going to be easy. It's not going to be easy by any stretch, but I will say that if you endure and if you learn how to continue to get through that adversity, it will make you stronger. And so if you're a police officer, we have a lot of police officers that listen to this. These are the messages that you need to be out there preaching to the people that you serve in your community. And being a police officer, you're in a unique position because you see you unfortunately see the dangers of what happens when you see people that cave in to the adversity, the drug addictions, the this and that. You see that.
Yeah.
So you need to take those experiences and be able to speak to kids that are wondering, what do I do? What's the next step? So that way you can help change. You can be that pivotal change that they need in their life. Go ahead, AJ.
You also have to ask yourself, what type of person are you, or like what type of person do you want to be? Like, for me, if I'm faced with like a challenge or like something that's difficult, you get me going. Like you get me going like you would not believe. I have done things that I've had zero interest in doing because I've been doubted or because I've seen that it was like challenging. Rock climbing is a perfect example. Like, I'm scared of heights, and I started rock climbing because I sucked the first time I did it. But I told myself, like, I don't like not being good at anything that I do. So I did it over and over and over again. So you can have that type of mentality when you face like this opposition, or when you face these challenges, or even before you start the journey. Like, even if you're looking at the terrain ahead and you go, man, this looks tough. Or you could be the person that shies away from it. You could be the person that goes, this looks difficult. I'm going to go the road more travel and more than likely get the same results that everyone else has gotten. And you have to realize that is the outcome more times than not. And I know it's like cliche, and I know it's been said time and time and time again, but it's real. Like, we all three have stories, and we are three of millions of people who have decided to step out of their comfort zone and go against the current and take the rougher terrain in hopes that we can accomplish change, or in hopes that we can accomplish whatever it is that you're seeking. And we have, but you have to do that. Like, you absolutely have to do that. And you have to have the mindset like, okay, it's getting hard. I got to get harder. It's getting difficult. I got to push through it. I know whatever it is that I want is just on the other side of this opposition, or just on the other side of this hate. We've said it. It's not going to be easy. We're telling you before you even start, it is not going to be easy. But what do you hear us not saying? It's not worth it. That's what we're not going to say, because it is worth it. It's hard, but it's worth it. Or you could do something that's easy and not worth it. You pick.
So true. It's so true.
So, Doc,
may I ask
Go
what
ahead.
cities you brothers live in?
I'm in Columbus,
So, yeah.
Ohio.
and I'm in
Where
no,
are you?
he's Columbus, Ohio. He's in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm in a city called Eastvale out here in Southern California, right next
Got
to
it.
Riverside.
Okay.
That's
So,
why I said Buckeye through and through. Buckeye through and through.
bro, if you
I
don't
like
get that
Arizona
Buckeye
though.
out of here.
I did a community event out in where were we at in Arizona? I want to say Phoenix, and
Okay.
I saw a cactus or cacti for the first time, and I was like,
Yeah.
y'all just got real cactuses late, like just
Really? You ain't
growing
never
like
seen
this, like.
This is the desert, brother. This is
Yeah.
the desert. Yeah.
So I have a question for you, Dr. Jones, if you don't mind. DJ, I'm
DJ,
sorry.
DJ.
Well, whatever, man. Whatever you
He
got.
about to make him mad here pretty soon. He
Yeah,
I told him,
yeah.
call
I
me DJ.
don't want no problems. I don't want no problems. So you obviously have an expertise, and a majority of our listeners and viewers, and the people who like follow our social media platforms are in law enforcement or have some sort of nexus to law enforcement. With everything going on in the world, not just the United States, not just Midwest, whatever. What's one piece of advice that you could give law enforcement as a whole? Just imagine you're speaking to every police officer out there right now. What's like some piece of advice you could give them to not only help them through these times, but to help them create positive change in the profession?
Yeah. So, it's a great question, AJ. And I want to start with, I don't at all want to sit here and pretend to understand the challenge of being a police officer.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. But with that comes accountability and responsibility.
Mhm.
Right. And, one of the things that I think is really important is to understand some of the things that we talked about, is that crisis comes in many, many forms. And part of what we need to just do as humans, let alone a police officer who really needs to understand, sometimes people are operating in crisis, and we need to be able to understand that when we approach the situation. Now, I'm not saying let's pull out psychology books every time somebody comes upon us, but crisis comes in many forms, and it doesn't always appear to be that way. So I think the more we understand these topics we're talking about, self-preservation, protection, acceptance, operating in dual identities, catching somebody at a bad moment, the more we understand that that's part of this crisis that we sometimes operate in, I think the more we can understand it's just, unfortunately, it's a part of humanity that we have to manage. And that some of us are put in a position of a higher level of accountability, i.e. police officers. And you have to be better equipped. Now, again, I can only imagine some of the challenges. And I watch a lot of investigation discovery. I don't know what it says about me, but I'm heavy in the true crime and missing persons and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Forensic Files, that's my show.
Yeah, Forensic Files is one of my, on run. I have it on run.
Yeah.
And I'm
I
talking
got the
about,
podcast.
oh yeah, I'm talking about back to like 2006, man, like old. But I'm fascinated by it. But I oftentimes sort of transport myself into a situation, and I'm like, yeah, these men and women do have it tough. They do have it tough. But so do we as human beings and citizens, are, just walking around. So we all have to try to find this common place of understanding, and at the same time protect ourselves, but try not to operate in self-preservation mode. But we have to understand what that means, and I'm happy to share more of that and how we can do that. But we really have to start to understand these triggers and cues.
No, it's good.
Yeah, and to his point, I'll say, and I'll speak on behalf of law enforcement. You know, for so long in law enforcement, we always just did things because that's just how they're always done, and we
Yeah.
didn't want to evolve. You know,
Yeah.
if you look at any business,
Mhm.
and I always tell leaders to do this. Look at any business. The business is constantly trying to figure out how can we improve our business practices. Always. Now, obviously, for businesses, because they're trying to improve sales, they're trying to improve, you know, the growth of the company. But in law enforcement, there was this idea that like this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're always going to do it. And so I think there's a huge disconnect between the leaders and then the line level officers. The line level officers, they don't have that big picture view. They don't have the big picture. They just go out there, they do their day job, they go hook and book, and they go home. Whereas the leader is looking at like, look, man, like these are the things, kind of like to what you're talking about, DJ, is like there are other ways to identify what a person's going through. There are other ways to identify a crisis. There's other ways to handle these situations. What can I do to best prepare my officers to go out there and try to de-escalate in a different way or a different manner? And then when that comes downhill and the agency is like, oh man, they're just forcing something on us. Oh, this is this and that. And so there's this disconnect. And so I say that to say this is like, we should always be looking to get better in law enforcement because there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. And so we can't always think that, you know, this is the way, this is the only way. We have to realize that there's always ways to do things better. Now, obviously, at the end of the day, as a police officer, your goal is to make it home safely to your family. And so there's things that you may have to do. There's decisions you may have to make in order to get yourself home at the end of the day. But at the same time, that doesn't remove the fact that we should always be exploring other options to figure out how can we best serve the community in a better way. And I think that's where we continue to move. And I think, and honestly, I'll say this, and I'll say it confidently. I know a lot of police departments, the majority of police departments, they're in that place right now where they're trying to get better. They're trying to do better. We're trying to do better to serve our communities. Not everyone, not every department, but most departments are. And so that's where conversations like this are had. So that way people that aren't in law enforcement know what's being done, but people that are in law enforcement are motivated, like by people like you, DJ. Like if you're listening to this, I want you to realize you don't have to be listening to somebody in law enforcement to be motivated to pursue something higher in your career.
That's
like
right.
when I talk to DJ, when I talk to other members, like I met the other day, like Cliff or like Tony, you know, whoever it may be, like Dak, they're not in law enforcement. But when you have conversations with them, it still inspires me because I know I can go out there and do more. You know, I know I can go out there and leave a legacy. So don't always just confide or go to people that they sound like you, they talk like you. No,
Great point.
venture out, understand what different cultures are like. So that way it helps you grow and helps you be better. So that's my last parting thought. AJ, any last parting thoughts before we transition into the very end, and then we'll wrap it up?
Yeah, you said the key word. You said the key word, and the key word is legacy. And at the end of the day, like you have to live with that. Like, what will your legacy be?
That's right.
And I'll tell you what I want mine to be. I want mine to be someone who actually created change. He didn't talk about it. I want mine to be someone that inspired people to do exactly that. And because I want that to be my legacy, that's that positive emotion that we talk about. So along this journey, when the terrain gets rough and the obstacles get high, I'm going to revert back to, okay, how do I want to be remembered at this time? It's getting difficult. Do I want to be remembered as the person that stopped because it got hard? And the many people who are following me and the many people that I'm inspiring right now are going to stop at this exact location or a mile down the road? Or do I want to be the person that pushes through this and crosses the finish line, and countless other people behind me get to cross that finish line as well? And you have to ask yourself, not just weekly, not just monthly, not just on New Year's Eve when you're doing your resolution, but every single hour of every single day. What do I want my legacy to be? I can't imagine the amount of stress and pushback that DJ has felt and experienced along his journey in life. You know what I've experienced. You know what Ryan has experienced listening to this podcast. But we're not stopping because we care about our legacy, because we care about the outcome. And I could talk about this all day long, but it's important. We get wrapped up so often in, well, what about them? What about them? No, what about you? What are you doing to solve this? What are you doing to be part of the solution and not part of the problem? Are you just talking about it? Are you actually doing something to create that change? So for me, my closing thoughts are that, what will
That's
your
good, that's
legacy
good.
be?
That's good.
Indeed.
DJ, any last closing thoughts?
So I have a few. I think another thing that we can all continue to do, and even through the lens of, you talked about police officers, is just pay attention to how the culture is moving and what direction it's moving in, and be an agent for positive change. To sit and watch a culture erode or shift in a negative direction, you're part of the problem.
That's right.
And I'm not saying that only lies in the world of policing. I saw it happen in a culture I was in an organization, a global organization. People who think the solution is just to kind of step back. It's like, no, man, you're a major executive here. It's your job to be a part of a shift. That's one. Number two, selfishly, I have a podcast with my co-host. It's called The Conscious Vibe. And Charles Mitchell, who is my fraternity brother, he's also an attorney and entrepreneur here. We have this podcast, and we talk about culture, business, race, politics. And we would love to have both of you brothers on the show.
Consider it done.
Oh, it'd be an honor, man. It will be an honor. And I'm actually, as I do that, let me put that on the banners right now. So that way you guys can make sure you guys follow it. I actually put up his IG handle too. What's the website again, DJ?
Yeah, the website is tcvpodcast.com. tcvpodcast.com. It's the Conscious Vibe podcast.com.
Perfect.
Yep,
So I just
that's
added
it.
that up on the screen right there. So make sure you guys go check them out there. So really quick, I have two last questions for you, DJ. These are just all completely off topic. First, I want to know is how dope is the Nike campus though? Because I've seen stuff on video, I've seen videos on TV or on Instagram. It seems like a pretty cool campus. Is it pretty legit?
Yeah, man, and continues to expand. It's incredible, man. And it's, I remember the first time I got invited out for an interview. This is back in '96. I was literally in awe. It's like the most wonderful college campus you've ever seen in your life.
Wow.
It's incredible. Soccer fields, football fields, wonderful buildings, statues of the most iconic sports figures you can think of. And it's like, damn, okay, this is where I'm going to work every day. It's crazy, man. It's as crazy and as iconic as you think it is.
That's cool.
That's dope. That's super dope. All right, so we haven't done this in a while, but I wanted to do it especially because we had a guest on. I wish Billy was here for this because Billy's just funny, so we can pick on him some more. But he's not. So, anyways, we're gonna go back to One Ask to Go. So, what this is, and I'm sure you've done this before, DJ. But if you had to get rid of one of these for all time, which one would it be? So that's what you. So we'll go around. I'm gonna go and put it up on the screen right now. So obviously, One Has to Go. You got Nike, Reebok, Adidas, or Jordan.
Easy.
So,
That's easy.
Yeah, what are you trying to do to me, man? So I still have stock in that swoosh and that jump, man.
Yeah.
So I already knew you weren't getting rid of them.
Yeah, no, they still allow me to be here during the day.
I heard that.
You know what, man? It's a tough one, but I'd probably say Reebok. I think Adidas, in a lot of ways, keeps us alert and on our toes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I have historical love for Reebok as well. I mean, I was a kid once. Have my affinity to that brand also, but I guess that would be the first one that I would say needs to exit.
I'm with you. Reebok got to go. You first off can't get rid of Nike, can't get rid of can't get rid of Jordan. Adidas, you got the shell toes. You come on, you can't that alone, right? That we talk about the historical aspect to them, and even in current,
I do know Reebok has been trying to make a comeback. They're doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Like they redid their brand and stuff like that. They're doing a lot of stuff with UFC and stuff. So like I like the facelift. I'm not gonna lie, I do like the facelift to the brand, no doubt about it. Like they had a really good facelift. But I think we would all agree on this. That's how I know we all sneakerheads and stuff like that. If Billy was on here, he would probably say, "Why is Crocs not on there?" Because Crocs, really mad and stuff. I should have put Crocs on there, but yeah. So I'm with you guys. I think we all in agreement. Billy, I don't know what Billy would choose actually. Billy would probably be like, Adidas is America's brand.
Yeah. Reebok has its place in history, man. I have no qualms with that brand, any of these brands up here, man. It's all part of sport and the history of sport, man.
That's it.
That's funny, man. So last question for you, DJ. Where can everybody find you at? Obviously, I put up your Instagram handle. I put up your guys's I put up your podcast. So is there any other place that you would like them to follow you at and subscribe
That's really
to
it, man. At DJ the Doc on Instagram. You can definitely find me there. It's private, but I'll stare at your face for a while and decide if I want to why are you trying to get in touch with me? But
yeah, exactly.
There's that, and then obviously TCV podcast.com. You can shoot me an email there as well. If someone wants to contact me directly via email, it's DLJ, so Daryl and Jones, my name, 14K at mac.com. DLJ 14K at mac.com, mac.com.
I ain't never known nobody to have an at mac.com. That must be that exclusive email right
that's
there.
OG stuff right there. That's the OG.
You know what? I think it's just at me.com.
Okay.
Have you guys heard of that one?
I have heard of at me.
Yeah. Me is the new version of that. It's either one.
Okay. All right.
You can either go at me or at Mac.
Gotcha.
So I'll be trying to talk about like I think I'm the Mac and all that kind of stuff.
I was like, that must be that invite only right there.
Ryan at macdaddy.com. You know what I'm saying?
That's it.
All right, we can DLJ14K at me.com.
Oh man. Well, guys, it was a true honor, true pleasure to be with you guys and do this podcast. It always is. And thank you, DJ, for coming on, man. I know it was Memorial Day. You too, AJ. I know a lot of you guys had plans and stuff, but we didn't want to miss an episode. I'm actually going to be traveling again this week. I'll be in Philly, so it would have been kind of hard. So I appreciate you guys getting on here, man. We can't wait to join you on your podcast. But with that being said, y'all, we love y'all. Be safe out there, and we'll see y'all next week. Peace.
Thank you, John.